reasons people might have to believe that, belief in God is rational. Lots of different angles that you could look at, different reasons that science and reason lend themselves towards theism, the belief in God. But we're only really in this series going to be having a look at two. And last week we talked about the first one, which is something called the Cosmological Argument, which in a nutshell, we won't do the whole thing again, but in a nutshell basically says that everything that exists has one of two possible explanations for it. Either it has come from something before it, something that pre-exists it, or it's existed forever. That's kind of really only the two options. Either it's come from something else or it's existed forever. And what the last 150 years of scientific discovery after discovery after discovery has shown is that the universe has not existed forever, that the universe itself has a finite beginning, that it must have a cause outside of itself, an original uncaused cause. And we had a brief look at what that uncaused cause must be. We looked at some of the definitions behind it, that it must be something, if it's outside the universe, if it's before the universe, it can't be part of the universe. It must be something outside of space and the physical boundaries of the universe. It can't be within the universe that didn't exist yet. It must be something outside of time, something eternal. It must be something immaterial, not bound to matter or energy. It must be something ultimately powerful, if it's capable of creating the entire universe. And it must be something with the ability or the agency to create the universe. So basically, all of science, all of the discoveries that we continue to make show that the universe has a finite beginning. The theory of general relativity, proof for the expansion of the universe, the presence of background radiation, the laws of thermodynamics, all of them point towards the universe having a beginning. All of them shut down the idea that the universe has a purely natural explanation, that it can explain its own existence, that it somehow caused itself, or that it's existed forever. On the contrary, it shows that there must be instead an original, eternal, external, uncaused cause. That was what we talked about last week. Today we're moving on to another reason, and I flagged last week that this is my more favorite reason to believe in God. If last week we were asking the question, why does the universe exist? Why is there a universe? Today we're asking the question, why is the universe the way that it is? Why is our world the way that it is? Why are things the way that they are? And really it seems like there's kind of two possible answers to that question. When we look at the universe and we see the order of it, the beauty of it, the complexity of it, either we say that it's the product of design, that it was created on purpose by some intelligence, or we say that it's the result of naturalism, random chance. There's no intelligence behind it. It's just kind of a bunch of random things happening, that just more and more random things happened until we've ended up in the state that we are today. And, I guess part of that theory, given enough time and enough planets in the universe, some pretty amazing things could happen. That's, I guess, part of the theory. There's no purpose, there's no meaning to it, it just is the way that it is. So we're going to look at those two possibilities and see which one is actually more reasonable and rational. Now, to get us thinking a little bit about that, before the service, me and a couple of people who were helping started a little bit of experiment. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to involve everyone in the experiment, but today I thought, and I did chat to Eva first, we're going to put up $200 on an experiment. And I explained to Eva, there is a possibility that this $200 is leaving the family account, that Elsa's inheritance, Judah's inheritance, there's a chance that we're going to depart with them. So I've got $200 cash here. And before the service, we were taking some guesses of a number. And we went around, there were a few of us with some clipboards, and we took a whole bunch of different guesses. I think in the end we ended up with 51 guesses for a particular number, for a number between 1 and 2 that goes to 14 decimal places. And some people I explained this to, some people I just said guess a number. But some people knew that if anybody could guess correctly the number, they would win $200. Legit. No, I wasn't expecting anyone to win, sorry. I'm very prepared to give away the $200. So, a number between 1 and 2. Sounds like a pretty easy thing to guess, doesn't it? 1.5, 1.8. Lots of people having all sorts of different guesses. But yeah, like I said, it was to 14 decimal places. I've got the number here. Are people ready? I know that some people didn't get to guess. I apologize for that. But for the 50-ish people who did get to guess, would you like to find out if you won the money? The number, I think, is going to appear up on the screen in a second. I did throw it in late, Raj, so there might be, hopefully, a number up there. Maybe. Oh, is it there? There it is. The winning number, 1.00137841870. Come on down, bingo. No, I did have a look, Steve. What did you guess? You guessed. Oh, goodness, where are you? Steve Trigg, 1.012345678910111. That was not the winning number. I'm sorry, Steve. Yes, I did already have a look through, and unfortunately, I'm so sorry, everyone. Surprise, nobody won. Rachel Slowey was the closest, I noticed. She guessed 1.0000000012345. That was the closest guess that anybody made. I would have been genuinely happy to give away that money, and I did tell Eva, like I said, that there was a real chance that if someone guesses the number, I'm going to have to give them the money. But I had a feeling going into the experiment that my money was pretty safe, because even just in that space between 1 and 2, with 14 decimal places, there are 100 trillion different options, aren't there? 100 trillion different combinations that people could come up with for that. So if someone had correctly guessed it and just gotten that 1 in a trillion chance, 1 in 100 trillion chance, then would have happily given them the money. But of course, it was always pretty unlikely. The odds of someone writing down the exact number were not impossible, but not likely. If you're wondering, I guess, if you think about 100 trillion, how much is that? It's hard to sort of get a scale for that sort of number. But if you think about the average human body, the number of cells in the average human body is about that number, 100 trillion. So it would be like saying, Bob, I've picked a random cell in Bob's body, and I need you to guess the correct cell. And if you can do it, I'll give you $200. It's pretty difficult. I mean, I don't have names for all the cells in Bob's body either, but it's a pretty challenging task to do. Now that number that I chose, the winning number that was up there before, was not a number that was chosen completely randomly. That number is actually an important number for the kind of thing that we're talking about today. That number that appeared on the screen a moment ago is actually something from the world of physics. It is the ratio of the mass of neurons to protons. It's one of a great number of different laws of physics that dictate how our universe works, and that particular number dictates basically how atoms work and how they remain stable. And to keep it simple, this number, sorry, no, I'm making it simple. That ship's sailed. Well, I'm trying. Okay, the simple version is that is an important number to the physics of all different things around us. Every little atom in our universe is dictated and operates out of that number, not just in the human body, not just on the planet Earth, in the entire universe. And here's the surprising thing. What we know is that that number kind of seems to be randomly generated by the universe. And there's a whole bunch of numbers like this, these constants of physics that have been set to very particular numbers and ratios, seemingly at random. The ratio we know could be higher, it could be lower. So why is it set to this precise number? And it's important because the fact is that if you change this number, even to the 14th decimal place, so if that number instead was 1.00137841871, then atoms would not work the same way. If you tweak it too far in one direction, then the universe, instead of containing mostly hydrogen, which is what is necessary for our universe to operate the way that it does, it would contain mostly helium, which means that all the stars would have well and truly burned out a long time ago. And if you tweak it too far, even just that 1/14th decimal place in the other direction, then the atomic structure becomes unstable and matter in the universe just doesn't even exist. That's a pretty shocking thing. And this is one constant, and this is not even 14 decimal places is small game in comparison to some of the big, ridiculous numbers that exist. Some of these numbers, there's a physicist known as Roger Penrose, not known as that, that's his name. And physicist named Roger Penrose. It's not a stage name or something, it's a scientist. And he talks about some of the numbers, in fact, we're going to watch the video in a second. He talks about them as being the kind of numbers that make your brain drip out your ears. Like they're just mind-boggling numbers that he's talking about. And so, yeah, we're going to watch a quick video just to recap in a simpler way, maybe, the kind of things that we've been saying. Thanks, Raj.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life-prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely.
Currently, sitting at the back of the room is Tony Cooper down at the sound desk. And the sound desk that we've got is a pretty impressive piece of machinery. I think we might have a picture of it there. I had a quick count, and I think there's about 300 dials on that thing, plus some sliders and a whole bunch of buttons. And each of those different dials and buttons and sliders controls some aspect of the sound just here in this room. But imagine instead that that panel was the panel that controlled our universe, and that each of those different dials controlled one of those laws of physics that were mentioned in that video. Imagine, have a look, pick one of them. Imagine that that dial controlled gravity. And what we were hearing in that video is that if you turned that dial even a microscopic amount in one direction, the universe just stops working and life anywhere in the universe becomes impossible. Oh, thanks, Tony. That wasn't the dial. Oh, Tony. Thanks, mate. See me after the service. All right, thanks everyone. Never mind. Turn it too far in one direction. Don't you touch it. Turn it too far in one direction, the universe stops working. Yeah, and it's not a matter of how much time you've then got or how many planets there are in the universe that eventually it'll catch up. Life anywhere in the universe at any time just becomes impossible. And if you turn it even a microscopic amount in the other direction, it also just stops working. And that's just for one of the dials. If any of the dials was turned even the slightest amount, life in the entire universe just is not possible anywhere at any time. That's a pretty mind-blowing thing to think about. So why is it that the universe is so perfectly attuned to life and to being the way that it is? When there are a near infinite number of possibilities, how do we explain the fact that the universe happens to be set with all the dials so perfectly in place? You may or may not know of a scientific theory that attempts to explain why something so unlikely happens to be how it is, why the dials are so perfectly set. An attempt to explain it without, like people, I guess, who come in saying, I definitely don't believe in God, what other options do we have? How could they explain it? You might have heard of the theory, I want you to have a bit of a think. What kind of theory might he be talking about? A scientific theory to explain without God why we got so lucky, why the universe is the way that it is. I reckon if we were to ask people, maybe some people might say the word evolution. Some people might say the word Big Bang, or the phrase Big Bang. But actually, I'm not talking about either of those, even though both of them do talk about the early stages of the universe and the creation of the universe, creation of life. Neither of those theories addresses this question at all. In fact, both the theory of evolution and the theory of the Big Bang only work once the dials are already set exactly as they are. If the laws of physics didn't allow matter to form in the universe, forget about those other theories. If the laws of physics, didn't allow for chemistry or all those different cosmological constants, both of those theories are just thrown out the window. They only work once the dials are already set exactly as they are. Neither of those options explain why we would have been so lucky. So what theory am I talking about? Funnily enough, it's a theory which pops up in pop culture, in a lot of sci-fi kind of things. It's been in a movie earlier this year. It's a theory known as the multiverse theory. It's a theory that says that our universe, the universe that we live in, is not the only universe. That there are, in fact, parallel universes, parallel dimensions, parallel realities that exist outside of our universe, and that our universe is just one of an infinite number of universes. Now, to me, that's such a strange but interesting thing for some scientists to believe, that ultimately, that question earlier, can you explain the universe just through natural reason, through natural causes, or do you have to go to something outside the universe? Funnily enough, scientists, even who are trying to explain how there could be no God, they're not staying in the universe. They're going outside the universe. They're talking about multiple realities, multiple other universes. And this multiverse theory is, there's no other way of putting it. It's a supernatural explanation. It's not a naturalistic explanation. It's a supernatural explanation. Supernatural really just meaning outside of the space and time and laws of physics of our universe. It invokes the supernatural. And it goes, of course, far beyond empirical science. It goes far beyond what we can see or sense or measure or prove or disprove. There's no evidence for these other realities other than just people have to sort of believe in it. And some scientists are starting to think about it because there's really no other explanation for how our universe could have just gotten so lucky other than to say there's an infinite number of them. Now, that might be a little bit confusing, but let me break it down. Okay, this will be nice and simple, Shaz. Sorry, you make one comment in church and now you're being heckled. When we were trying to guess that 14-digit number, right? We had 51 guesses. Now, 51 guesses at a 1 in 100 trillion number is pretty unlikely, okay? The money was pretty safe. But what happens if instead of having 51 guesses, you have 1 million guesses? Still unlikely, but your chances go up, right? What about if instead of 1 million guesses, you had 100 trillion guesses? Then the likelihood of you guessing the number is very high, or if you're being smart about it, you're going to get the number. What if you had an infinite number of guesses at that 14-digit number? If you had an infinite number of guesses, then of course, some of those guesses are going to be correct. The ridiculously overwhelming majority are going to be wrong. But if you have an infinite number of guesses, some of them are going to be right. That's kind of how the multiverse theory works, is that our universe is so incredibly unlikely that the only way to explain why the dials are set the way that they are is to say that there must be an infinite number of parallel universes, so that in almost all of them, the numbers are wrong and the universe doesn't work and it explodes back in on itself, collapses or expands to infinity or whatever, and the numbers don't work and the whole universe just breaks. Or to use the analogy again of the sound desk, that there's an infinite number of panels that control the universe, and in almost all of them, a ridiculous number of them, the numbers are wrong and the universe doesn't work. But with an infinite number of sound desks, in some of them, the dials are going to be set correctly, and a universe like ours will appear. Most people think that atheism, the belief that there's no God, believes in a naturalistic universe, that everything can be explained from within our universe, from within our own science and our own observation and measurement and things like that. And the idea that the supernatural might exist, anything outside of a natural explanation, is kind of worth laughing at. But actually, that's probably what most people believe, but actually atheistic scientists, people who don't believe in God, have completely abandoned that perspective. They've completely accepted that it's just not possible, that they're looking to the supernatural for an answer. They're looking to something that we can't see or feel, something outside of our natural universe to help explain it. And sorry, Raj has one more video for us to watch.
Really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
We're on the home stretch. That argument, that fine-tuning argument, maybe there's some parts of it that are like interesting, maybe some parts that are difficult to understand. Definitely encourage anyone who wants to chat more about it or even has objections to it or anything like that to come to our Q&A afterwards. We'll just meet down the front again. I think Liv and Haven are even going to take coffee orders for us again. What legends. Thank you, guys. So you can still get your coffee or your tea if you come down the front and join us. But yeah, no pressure for anybody to. But ultimately, some of the things that we've talked about today, some of them might have clicked, some of them might be confusing. Maybe some people find it really interesting, and I'm sure that there are plenty of people who don't. Or maybe even just people who find it strange. Let me finish by giving you one of my favorite analogies. And people who have spent a bit of time around me will have heard this a million times, so I'm sorry about that. But it's one of my favorite analogies that explains all of this. And it's actually, a story. It's a story about a man who's wandering along a road and he finds a pocket watch. And you can imagine that as he's walking down the road and sees the pocket watch, he bends down, picks it up, has a look at the object in front of him, and he turns it over in his hands and he can see the engraving on it, the way that it's carved, the complexity of the gears inside the chains, all the different links in the chain, that it's, not only very functional and complex, but it's very beautiful as well. Maybe he fiddles around with it, can wind it up, sees the dials and all the different notches on the pocket watch. Maybe you can see the cogs turning, the hammers striking, all the different parts that make the watch go. Now the man has a choice to make, two different options to explain the existence of the pocket watch. One explanation is to say that perhaps the pocket watch came into existence by random chance, that perhaps the metals underneath the earth formed together, got heated up by the earth's core, kind of formed into the right shape, that it brushed against other materials somehow under the surface, that made it into gears and things that just sort of clicked together, that cut the engraving across the back of it and across the case, and formed the chain and all the individual links that all connected together, and that some sand particles under the surface heated up and melted into glass that made the front of the watch, and that the whole thing kind of just like rose to the surface of the earth, and there it is, it sits there, and that's the most reasonable explanation of how the watch came to be there. Now that seems pretty unlikely, that a watch could just form itself out of the earth. Ridiculously unlikely, maybe almost impossible. Maybe when you consider the probability of that happening, it's the kind of number that makes your brain drip out your ears. It's so unlikely. But what if I said to you that an infinite number of parallel universes exist, and that in one of them, sure, a pocket watch did just happen to form out of the earth. An almost infinite number of universes exist. You happen to live in the one where a pocket watch just formed itself out of the earth. Is it unlikely? Yes. Is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. Maybe you got lucky. Maybe you live in the universe where the pocket watch formed itself. But there is, of course, another explanation, isn't there? An explanation which I think is actually a lot more reasonable, a lot more rational, a lot more scientific, and a lot less far-fetched. That is that the pocket watch actually has a maker. That someone actually designed the watch. Someone actually used their intelligence to create it, to design it, that the watch has a purpose, that the watch doesn't just exist by accident or pure chance, that it didn't just form itself, but that actually someone designed it. I find it fascinating that there are some people who would rather believe, or who feel more convinced by, the idea that the pocket watch is explained by an invisible infinity of universes, rather than saying, it looks like it was designed. To me, it's so much more rational and logical and scientific to say that there's actually some kind of designer to this universe. And for me, the more that we understand about science and about the world around us, the more that it continues to point towards this life being designed on purpose. As we continue to make more discoveries in science, our appreciation for just how absurdly unlikely our universe is continues to grow. The idea, basically this is the bottom line, the idea of the universe that we live in having a natural explanation is dead and buried. That hypothesis is gone. Scientists, whether they're theists or atheists, have all abandoned that possibility. Nobody is talking about a naturalistic universe anymore. Despite what might be the prevailing message of the Western world, when I think about science, personally, I can't think of an aspect or discovery of science that conflicts with theism, personally. I can't think of a particular aspect of science that conflicts with belief in God. Love to be part of Q&A and chat that through if anyone's keen. But I can think of an enormous number of scientific discoveries that conflict with atheism, that conflict with the idea of a natural explanation of the universe, the idea that random chance formed the universe. To me, not only is the belief in a creator rational and reasonable, to me it's almost undeniable. Now that's two reasons to believe in God that we've looked at last week and this week. There are many more that we could have gone into, and if we had more time we would go into. And I know some great resources if you want to be pointed in that kind of a direction. But next week we're moving on from looking at general evidence for the existence of a God to sort of like theism in general. We're actually going to be zooming in a little bit and saying, well, out of all the different ideas about God, why would we think that the Christian God is the one? Why would we believe that Christian faith is any different to any other faith? So hopefully you can join us for that too. Let me finish by praying and the team might come up. Dear God, we thank you that we see your fingerprints all throughout our universe, that as we continue to make new discoveries and unlock some of the secrets of this beautiful place that you've made, God, we thank you that time and time again we see your design, we see the beauty, we see the complexity, and it reveals you, even as King David wrote in that psalm, that it proclaims the work of your hands. Lord, we thank you that, you don't call us to blind faith, you don't call us to just trust or hope in something that's empty, but you give us good reason to be able to trust you and trust in the hope that you promise us. Lord, I pray that in our interactions with our friends and our family, even in the doubts that we might have in our own mind, that you encourage. God, I pray that you would help us to be able to stand firm and to know that we can have that solid foundation in you. Thank you for this time together again. In Jesus' name, amen.